Hello there and welcome to the Q&A show, live and interactive. This program is all about the viewers. Whatever questions you may have, we've got Dr. Grady with us tonight who's going to be able to answer them. Dr. Grady, are you there?
I am, sir. A pleasure to see you again.
Thank you so much, Grady, for joining us. And Dr. Grady is obviously American Christian apologist, focusing on areas of biblical creation, creation science. He's a life member of Creation Research Society and a member of Mensa Society. We're very privileged for you to join us tonight, Grady. Thank you so much.
It is my pleasure, as always, sir.
Grady, we've just had the COP26 has just launched now in Glasgow, and obviously 2021 United Nations Climate Change Conference, also known as COP26, is a 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference. It's currently being held in Glasgow, Scotland, between the 31st of October up until the 12th of November. Boris Johnson did a speech this morning, and this is what he said. He outlines the devastating impacts of global temperature rise, and he actually said it's 1 minute to midnight on that doomsday clock. Grady, what do you make of all of this?
I think that the Prime Minister has been very poorly served by advisors. He has been grossly miseducated. The fact of the matter is the Earth would actually be better off for all humanity if some additional warming were to occur. We'd be able to grow crops further north and further south with a growing population. The fact of the matter is we should be releasing all the carbon dioxide that's been sequestered. The plants would simply absorb it. CO2 is not a significant greenhouse gas at all. And so there's an awful lot of misinformation out there. This comes primarily from those who wish to promote socialism, communism by putting up a straw man, where people are saying, well, I can't solve the problem, I have to let government do it. And they're giving up their rights in order to let the government do it. I would point out that this goes back to an evolutionary worldview. And in fact, if you take a look at the evolutionists, they're at conflict with each other. After all, think about it for just a moment. Anybody who's been educated in evolution in school knows what's called the Carboniferous period, the coal forming period, according to evolutionists, supposedly 300 to 360 million supposed years ago. Even evolutionists agree that supposedly, according to them, that we had 1,000 to 2,000 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Today, it's only 400. So obviously, the 1,000, 2,000 parts per million that occurred supposed millions of years ago wasn't caused by people. According to them, people didn't even exist at that time. Remember, we're supposed to be a more recent fixture, and it's supposed to have been around less than 1 million years. But when you take a look at what they publish in one hand, it says there's been way more carbon dioxide in the past before humans, and today they're saying that people can somehow or another create warming and cooling. It's an absurdity.
But Grady, emails have already started coming in, so let's go into them straight away, shall we? Dave's written in to say, hi, Dr. Grady and Cyrus. Could you please give me your opinion on Expositor's Study Bible? Expositor's Study Bible, Grady.
Expositor's Study Bible. Well, first of all, I am not here, nor is my dear brother Cyrus, to sell or not sell various books. All I would say about any commentary and so forth is that you should never buy a Bible with a built-in commentary. You should always keep your commentaries and your Bibles separate when you're studying them. That way you'll never mistake what is the Word of God and what is the Word of people.
That's very good. Thank you, Grady. John's written in to say hello to you both. This is a question from my Muslim friend. What is meant by Jesus when he said, for the Father is greater than I? I found in John chapter 14, verse 28.
Well, first of all, you'll also remember that Jesus said, the Father and I are one. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. What he's talking about is, in terms of the decisions made, that the Father is superior in the sense that a husband is the head of the house, and yet the husband and the wife are nonetheless equal within the family. So it's just talking about a hierarchical thing. So when I talk about creation, for example, I say that all three, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, were there at creation. That is quite obvious. The second word of the Hebrew Bible tells us that God, Elohim, which is plural, were present at creation. And I liken it this way. The Father was the architect. It was his plan. The Son is the general contractor. He's overseeing the work. But the Holy Spirit is the tradesman, and yet they are all equal to each other. So there's just a hierarchical reference there. It has nothing to do with the Father being superior to the Son in the sense that they are equal.
This one's coming in from Frankie in Belfast. The reason for the earth in chaos is sin. 2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. Notice the sin in this scripture and healing of the land if they repent. But oh no, they won't. Psalm 2:2. The kings of the earth set themselves and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord, but from a high gods laugh at them. For their efforts are in vain. It's not global warming nonsense they shout about. It's the sin going on in the earth. Look at the state of it, shining bright. Keep shining bright. That's Frankie in Belfast.
Well, indeed, it is because of human sin that we have the decay of all systems in the universe, whether physical or biological. And so if you want to take a look at the beginning of what's wrong, you can always go back to the initial human sin in the Garden of Eden. It simply spreads from there.
This one's from Cynthia saying, could you please explain what is this verse? The verse means when, please, in Jeremiah 31:32, for the Lord has created a new thing in the earth. A woman shall encompass a man. Was this because of Israel turning away from the Lord? And why does the Lord say this?
Well, first of all, when you look at that from a prophetic standpoint, that gets into an area that I don't discuss. I don't get into eschatology. But I would say, of course, that the Father tells us that he does a new thing, which is to say that he is not simply the God of the past and the present, but he's also the God of the future. He tells us that he is the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and yet he always says, but I do a new thing. That there's a constant revealing that he is not limited, that he has infinite characteristics that will never totally encompass ourselves.
Okay, the next one's coming in from Tony saying, good evening, Dr. Grady and Cyrus. Many preachers, teach, etc. have said, try not to use Bible commentary. I do know that what they mean, but wouldn't someone who is quite new to the Bible and not very literate benefit from a commentary? Daniel's 70 weeks was difficult for me until I heard someone else describe it, for example. That's from Anthony.
Well, of course, when you're a first Christian, everything is new, and you certainly want to get good information. I have no problem with owning commentaries, but I would admonish everybody to get conservative commentaries and not liberal commentaries if you're going to use them at all. And so, yes, you should read the Word for yourself. You should allow the Holy Spirit to lead you and guide you. But when you're a new Christian in particular, it is wise to have good Christian counsel of mature Christians. And, of course, a commentary could be a benefit there. But again, I stress conservative, not liberal.
This one's from Dave. Dave's written in, say hi to you both. Dr. Grady, in the past, you've said that the Nazca lines in South America were man-made. If so, how do you explain the one particular set of lines, the spider, as it shows it is with the reproductive organ on one leg only? The actual size of the spider is in real life is tiny, and its reproductive organ could only be seen through a microscope. Microscopes had not been invented when those lines were laid down. How did they know about it? That's from Dave.
Well, number one, man has been a good surveyor for thousands of years. Again, we could go to the Egyptians, the Chinese, India, Africa, every continent. Man was highly intelligent, well educated, coming through the flood with Noah and the family to the Tower of Babel and then spread across the earth. Individually, people were much more intelligent than today. Secondly, while you may say that these organs are microscopic and therefore invisible, that is not exactly true. It's not exactly true either that people weren't able to see magnification.
Mm.
If we go to the Neanderthal caves, for instance, in France, uh, today people marvel at how accurately they could show the moving legs of many horses where today a modern artist wouldn't be capable. They were more intelligent, they had better vision, they were larger, healthier, etc., than we are today. Remember, Neanderthals had a brain that on average was 13% larger than ours today. So with that in mind, then, it is quite possible that they were able to magnify. After all, you can magnify using nothing more than water. If you had a clear vessel with water and hold an object behind it, the water will magnify it. You don't even need a glass lens.
This one's from Carol and Jonathan. They've written, say, Dear gents, thanks for such a great program. Do you think atoms could, in theory, last forever, or are they running down in a fallen world? Can they actually survive as long as evolutionists claim for the age of the universe, since that would virtually be perpetual motion? Your thoughts would be appreciated.
Well, let's go backwards there for a second. The second law proves the Earth and the universe could not be eternal, period. Therefore, the evolutionary idea of eternal mass, energy, and time is invalidated by the second law to begin with. As far as atoms are concerned, now, understand that there are those atoms which are stable and those which are not, those which will interact with others and those which will not. For example, helium doesn't react naturally with any other element. And therefore, the stable atoms, in theory, could last a great amount of time. However, again, we still have the motion of atoms using up energy. Now, if we apply that with the logical end of things, what happens is, remember that atomic vibration is what we call heat. And so as that energy is being used up, those molecules are slowing down, those atoms are slowing down. And in theory, you reach what's called a heat death when atoms stop moving, but that doesn't mean they cease to exist.
Kenneth's written in to say, hi, Cyrus and Dr. Grady. Would you explain why Paul in Romans chapter 4 praises the faith of Abraham and says he did not consider his own age or the deadness of Sarah's womb, but believed God would do that he had said he would? Surely if Abraham had believed God, he would not have slept with Hagar.
Well, first of all, I would point out to you, that wasn't Abraham's idea. That was Sarah's idea to start with. And it was a bad idea. It was Sarah that lacked the faith. Now, Abraham went along with it, I agree. But then again, Adam went along with Eve, too. So, you know, men are susceptible to women's opinions. But the fact of the matter is, it was not what God intended. And of course, Abraham had to grow in faith. We know that initially he didn't have the faith that he would have later on when he would become the great patriarch of the faith. So I think that you have to kind of moderate things just a little bit there in the statement. It was Sarah's idea. Abraham went along with it incorrectly. But at the time, there was a tradition that this kind of activity would in fact produce a valid offspring for the heir of the family. So you have to tolerate that as well with the cultural knowledge of the time.
Very good. Now, Dr. Grady, I forgot to ask you, you're at home now, aren't you? Because normally every time we speak to you, you're traveling around the country. This time you're actually at home. Your wife must be so happy.
This is actually my natural state, yes. And my wife says she's happy to have me home, and I take her at her word.
That's it. Receive it, brother. Receive it. This one's in. Steve from Cumbria has written in to say, hi, Australian scientists said there was only 1% difference between apes and humans. What is the real difference and the truth? Thank you.
Yes, well, first of all, I'm going to put that in a very succinct statement. The idea that apes, chimpanzees, humans are only 1% different genetically was never, ever based on any actual science. That was an idea that was simply believed in, and that lie started back about 1999. But by the year 2000, even evolutionists agreed that it was lower than that. However, today, due to the completion of the Human Genome Project in April 2003 and additional research with apes since then, we now know the genomes of humans and apes inside and out. The truth is that we're only about 70% the same as apes. You also have to remember that all life on Earth, regardless of what it is, shares 25% the same DNA. Therefore, you cannot compare creatures based on similarity of DNA. If you want to do that, well, you're only 70% the same as an ape, but you're 50% the same as a banana. You're 88% the same as a rat. Now, on this scale, which one would you be closer to then?
Very good. Peter's written in, Grady, to ask, do you believe Genesis 8 verses 22 is significant in the issue of climate change? And it says, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, winter and summer, and the day and night shall not cease. So is this related to climate change, Grady?
Oh, I think it's very much related to climate change. First of all, humans cannot heat the earth, we cannot cool the earth, we cannot change the climate, period. And there's approximately 36 verses of the Bible where God says, I'm in charge of the weather and you can't change it. And it starts with Genesis 8:22. In the presentation on No Truth to Global Warming or Cooling that I did with Revelation some years ago, I actually used a variety of verses, and I would add to that, for instance, Amos 4:7. God uses the weather to chastise or to bless. He can make it rain on one side of the street, not on the other. We cannot affect weather except in a very local area. And that's simply a microenvironment situation where, for instance, with human cities reaching 25 million, there's a slight change in the climate for the local area, but it's not a global effect whatsoever. The true driving factors in global warming and global cooling are sunspot activity and volcanoes.
Okay. Well, Ash has written in, I think he's given you, Grady, a bit of an Irish twist to your name. He says, Dear Mr. O'Grady. There you go. It's a bit of an Irish twist there, Grady.
Indeed.
And he says, Boris Johnson used to be a huge climate skeptic. Suddenly he is now green. I do believe that somewhere along the lines he has compromised himself. And that's from Ash. The next question here.
He's definitely compromised himself and the nation, frankly. The worst thing that we could do is be getting into these climate agreements like this, especially when the two greatest polluters on Earth aren't even at the conference.
Yeah. China and Russia, isn't it? Robert's written into...
China and India.
India's there. It's Russia who aren't there, isn't it, Grady?
Russia's not there. China's not there.
Yeah, correct.
But I would also point out that India and China are great polluters.
Yeah,
after all, China
absolutely.
pollutes more than the whole EU and the U.S. together.
Yeah. Robert's written in, say, good evening, Grady and Cyrus. Grady, you are right about the earth warming being a good thing in some ways. Also, if the CO2 levels increase, then the plants will grow quicker for our foods and oxygen, etc. Do you agree?
Right. I already did earlier in the program.
Yeah.
Like I said, we should release all the carbon dioxide that's been sequestered by countries like Norway. The plants would simply absorb it, and we would all be better off for it. Again, it's not a significant greenhouse gas whatsoever. After all, remember, we're talking about roughly 0.4% of the entire atmosphere. Actually, water vapor in the atmosphere absorbs roughly 75% of the heat that's in the atmosphere to begin with, and has nothing to do with global warming, cooling from man-made gases. These are natural things that God put in nature, and we have to have the atmosphere warming to keep us alive. If it didn't, we'd all die.
This one's coming in from Kenneth, and he's saying, can you please tell me, who are the two witnesses in Revelation 11 I believe they are Elijah and Enoch. Can you please confirm? Revelation 11.
I would agree. One of them is specifically named without a doubt, and the other one is the only other logical choice, because these are the only two that we know of from the past that have not yet died. And remember, it is required that we all die once, and even Jesus didn't get out of here alive.
Okay, this one's coming in saying from Jim in Liverpool, good evening, gentlemen. It says, the first I heard of the link between temperature and CO2 levels was a presentation by Al Gore many years ago. During the presentation, he showed two charts detailing the peaks and troughs of temperature and CO2. At the time, he didn't overlay the charts. Apparently, if he had done, it would have showed that the CO2 actually followed the temperature and not what Al Gore was implying at the time, i.e. increase of CO2 increases temperature. I heard on the media last week that there is now talk by some scientists that increased temperature could lead to increased CO2. Is this correct? And is what Al Gore misled the public those years ago still misleading the public today? What do you think?
Mr. Gore was a great deceiver when it comes to, again, the issues about climate. There's not a single truth in his book nor his movie that came out in May of 2006. The only truth in it is his name. The fact of the matter is that historically, the Earth has always warmed prior to an increase in CO2, because when the Earth warms, then more plants grow, then more CO2 is produced. So the fact of the matter is it's exactly the opposite of what these environmental terrorists are trying to indoctrinate people into believing.
Okay, Peter's written in to say, hi, Cyrus and Dr. Grady. How do you think believers look physically now who have died and are at present with the Lord? Are they at this stage disembodied spirits, or do they have an intermediate body? After all, the rich man in Luke 16 could see, recognize and communicate with Lazarus, the former in Hades, the latter in heaven. Also, the tribulation martyrs are given white robes, Revelation 6 verse 11, before they receive their resurrection bodies, and they need a body to wear those white robes. What do you think, Grady?
Well, again, when we take a look at describing the glorified body, obviously in heaven, I can't tell you, I've not been there. But the fact of the matter is that when Jesus came back in a glorified body, he's clearly seen, touched, ate, spoke. And the same thing is true for us. Now, we're told that we will recognize each other in heaven. We're not so many disembodied spirits. Now, the resurrection of the body from the ground will occur later, but that we're highly recognizable. I would also point out that the story of Lazarus and the rich man is not heaven and hell. Lazarus, that particular man named Lazarus, was in paradise, speaking to the rich man who was in hell, and speaking across the abyss or pit, as it is referred to, which again is a part of the underworld prior to the resurrection.
This message has come in saying, on the globe Earth, how would the water bend around the curve? Can the water bend, or has it ever bent anywhere in history ever?
I'm not exactly sure what that question is asking, but I would point out that everything on Earth, regardless of where it is on the surface, is being pulled towards the center. And this is why the water, quote unquote, bends, if that's what I understand you to talk about. And so when we see the Earth, the water is curved on the surface if we look at it over long distances. But the reason is because everything is being pulled to the center. That's a part of the law of gravity. And so the water isn't curving. It's simply in place where gravity would hold it.
Les is asking, Grady, why are they worried about global warming? Seems politically motivated. Someone should tell them that during the tribulation there is going to be global meltdown and nothing that they can do to stop it. Something about elements melting, global warming in comparison, like a walk in the park. That's from Les.
Les, I like you. And of course, Revelation tells us that there's also going to be the evaporation or disappearance of much of the water from the surface as well. However, I would not consider the end times to be particularly tied with the global warming issues today. I would simply say, do not allow these environmental terrorists to indoctrinate you into believing false science.
Okay. James has written in to say, hi guys, is there any correlation between increased sunspot activity and increased volcanic activity on Earth? Good question.
There is not a direct relationship there. What is interesting, however, is that the two interact in such a way that although the volcanoes are not created by sunspots nor vice versa, both of them have effects on the warming or cooling of the Earth. Therefore, when sunspot activity goes up, and if volcanic activity goes up, they then both work together to cool the Earth even more. And I would point out 1815, the eruption of Tambora in the western end of Indonesia. Because of that one eruption, and because we were at the bottom of a sunspot cycle in 1815, the next year there was no summer. It's called the year without summer, 1816. And so they can often work together coincidentally. On the other hand, of course, if there's a high degree of solar spot activity and no volcanoes going on at the time, then you're going to get that heating without anything contradicting it. Mm-hmm. On the other side of that is, again, if you go into a low sunspot cycle, or we just came out of a solar minimum 9 months ago, mm-hmm. And there's no volcanic activity, you're going to get a lot of cooling. So again, they work together. Sometimes they counter each other, sometimes they reinforce each other, but there's no direct connection between them. It's all coincidence.
Okay, Jonathan's written in to say, thanks for such a great program. Do you think atoms could in theory last forever, or are they running down in a fallen world? Can they actually survive as long as evolutionists claim for the age of the universe, since that would virtually be perpetual motion? Your thoughts would be appreciated.
Well, we just did that email a little earlier, so I think that's a duplicate that he sent in.
Okay, let's go on to the next one.
Your attention.
Cynthia's written in to say, let's see. Cynthia's asking, Grady, did you see the music video of Howard's Who's Going to Save the World? Did you see that, Grady?
I'm sorry, no. But you have to remember that I'm not able to always watch there because sometimes as much 5, 6, 7, and even 8 hours off of your UK time. So it's not possible for me to do that.
Grady, we're going to send you the link. You obviously haven't been watching Revelation TV enough.
Well, there's truth in that now. There's definite truth in that. And I highly sponsor people watching RTV, believe me.
You need to set the example, Grady. This one's coming in. I don't know if we've read this one already. Grady says, I think you're right about the Earth warming because of a good thing is some way. Also, if the CO2 levels increase, these plants will grow quicker for food and oxygen. Do you agree? That's from Robert.
Well, again, remember that the plants grow faster after the warming comes. So remember, it's CO2 comes after, not before the warming. We would all be better off. There is no question about that. Even though I don't personally like the heat, I would point out to you again, there are 3 times in the last 4,000 years that we know of when the Earth was significantly warmer than today. That's the medieval warm period, the Roman warm period, and the Minoan warm period. And this is before the Industrial Revolution. Again, people didn't cause it. These were natural events that God set in motion. And again, even evolutionists say that the amount of CO2 in the Earth's atmosphere was anything from 2.5 to 5 times what it is today. And that's before humans were even supposed to exist. And so this whole thing about global warming, global cooling, the COP26, it is a farce. It is simply politicians attempting to force socialism and communism on people by setting up this straw man argument. But it is simply not true, and we'd all be better off if we were warming.
Mm-hmm. This message has come in, Grady, asking, what do you think about GM foods?
Well, genetically modified foods is an issue that I think should, again, be taken up by the individual, not by government forcing it down your throat, just the same way I feel about mandates on other things.
Mm-hmm.
Now, remember that, of course, we have had genetic modification of plants in the past by hybridization, not specifically manipulating genetic information in the laboratory. And it's not necessarily bad, because there are benefits such as resistance to various diseases or insects, which would increase crops in total amount, which would benefit a growing population. But of course, what we are doing is experimental. And my concern is not the GM stuff. My concern is that we failed to keep the original natural stocks alive. So if you were to see corn in its original state in a grocery store, you would pass it right by. You wouldn't even give it a second thought. Those nice yellow straight lines of corn kernels on a cob and so forth that everybody likes to buy in the grocery store, you have to remember it's far less nutritious anyway, even if it's not genetically modified.
Yeah.
But it has been, because we've removed genetic information to get it straight and yellow and look good. But the fact of the matter is, to do that, we removed genetic information. That's not genetic modification. That's genetic removal, because natural corns are crooked in many colors, etc., but far more nutritious.
Our good old friend Dylan's written in to say, hi, Cy and Dr. Grady. My question to Grady is, do you think God is almost ready to pour out the terrible judgment bowls? People are trying to save this wicked earth, but I can't wait for it to be a new earth free of Satan.
Well, first of all, Maranatha. I'll agree with that. But I take Jesus at his word that no man shall know, therefore I'm not going to speculate.
Dot's written in to say, hi guys, Dr. Grady, what's your opinion on the Seventh-day Adventist? I've heard that they were a cult. Have they changed? Listening to them recently, it makes sense to me when they say they should be worshipping on a Saturday and following the commandments to keep the Sabbath holy. Also just heard that the Pope wants to make Sundays an international holy day, which doesn't sit well. God bless, from Dot.
Well, first of all, in my book that I wrote on the Feast of the Old Testament, I make it quite obvious. While Christians, and remember, Christian Jews were the foundation of the first century church, worshipped on the Sabbath. They started worshiping on Saturday and on Sunday. And then finally, Christians were kicked out of the synagogue by the Jews because of a conflict over things like communion. It was a misunderstanding. But in my book, I also include all of the historical things that even various first century, second century writers talk about, how we started worshiping on Sunday, the first day of the week, and for a variety of reasons. But the single greatest reason was we got kicked out, not because we left. Mm-hmm. And so I see no problem with it whatsoever. As far as the Seventh-day Adventists are concerned, I want to stipulate a truly conservative Seventh-day Adventist is a Christian. We may disagree, other Protestants may disagree on certain doctrines such as soul sleep, but that does not prevent them from being genuine Christians. Mm-hmm. The problem is in Seventh-day Adventism, if they ever start to go 1 inch to the left, they go into sects, such as the Jones when he took his group down to South America, for instance, came out of that. The Branch Davidians in Texas came out of the Seventh-day Adventists, and they had gone into a cult. And so they must be very, very careful to stay very conservative, to be within the Orthodox Christian religion.
Now, Grady, we've just shown you a website on screen now, and just want to encourage our viewers. You've got so much information on there, free information available for the viewers. Give an insight on what sort of information do you have on there, Grady?
We have over 100 articles on a variety of subjects. Only a few of them are technical in the sense of ivory tower type stuff. All of the others are easily read. We also have a Did You Know button, where we have some 350 or so short videos, and those are all free. We do have a bookstore for materials to be purchased, either by electronic download or by shipping. but I appreciate you mentioning it. It's very nice of you.
No, we appreciate you joining us on a Q&A show as always, Grady. This one's come in from Jill to say, Grady, do you think electric cars will ever work out, or is this just another red herring?
Well, again, it's a totally false concept. First of all, we've had electric cars since roughly the first time we had cars. People don't realize it, but we had electric cars 120 years ago. The fact of the matter is, however, I personally am against them because electric cars actually pollute more than gasoline cars do. Because when you have to take a look at the entire package, where did you get that electricity? What is the loss of getting the electricity to wherever the charging station is? What is the limitations of people? After all, when you run out of electricity, you can't go down the street and get a gallon of it and put it back in.
Mm-hmm.
There are many problems with this. Now, hybrids, I think, have a lot more benefit to society because, again, you're running on fossil fuel, but you have the benefits of the battery, but you're not reliant upon the battery entirely.
Yeah.
But the 100% electric cars, I am very much against personally, because, again, it actually causes greater pollution. You have to have cobalt, you have to have other rare earth metals. The mining locations are very hazardous, very toxic. A lot of people are going to be dying getting these things for those who feel good about having an all-electric car.
And I think in the United Kingdom,
they are two different things.
Yeah, I think in the United Kingdom, they just don't have the infrastructure in place. They did a report over the weekend on Sky News, and the driver went from London up to COP26, and he went up to Glasgow, and he kept running. He had no juice, so to speak, left in his car, and he went to charge it, and the charging stations, it was something like 2 in 10 were not working, and he found difficulties to try and find a place to actually charge the vehicle as well. So it's not as easy as it looks.
Well, again, I stress that the rare earth metals, the cost, you've got to take a look at this. You know, it costs you thousands of dollars more to get a car here and pounds in UK, whatever. In addition to which, though, you're making yourself feel good because you don't see any smoke coming out the back end. What you're not looking at is the amount of smoke that's being produced to get that electricity there. You still have to burn coal, oil, natural gas. Wind and solar are a fictional concept. They don't work. And I just published some materials on this. What people aren't looking at is, yeah, it's really a great idea to think that God will provide wind and he'll provide the sun to give you energy to do things. That's a great idea. But the truth of the matter is that the technology itself pollutes, because when you take down the wind turbines, you've got to store them. They cannot be recycled. They fill landfills. The solar panels themselves will be damaged regardless of what happens to them, or they'll run out of their lifespan. But then the materials in them are highly toxic, and the ability to then recycle those materials or take care of them as a hazardous material costs more than any benefit.
I'm going to ask you the most difficult question of the night, Grady. What books do you have behind you? Tell us, give us an insight.
Oh, the books I have behind me. Well, I have a whole shelf over, I guess I'll point. This side has many books on the history of Scotland, as well as some Bible study and some historical. Above my head, I have a lot of historical materials, and to the other side, over here, is an entire library of Bible study materials, including commentaries and subject books that are specific. But this is just a hint of my total library. My wife has told me that if I buy one more bookcase, I'm out of here.
Yeah. Grady, you need to go digital. You need to get an ebook, Grady.
No.
Very good. All right.
Thank you.
Cynthia's written in to say, I always believe that only God has his hands on the earth and climate changes, and it's the only world leaders think that they can change it through pouring billions of money into the oblivion. That's from Cynthia. Thank you, Cynthia. Let's see.
We are wasting trillions and trillions of pounds, euros, dollars, yen, won, pesos in something that is nothing more than keeping people employed and will have no benefit on the planet whatsoever.
Robert's asking, hi, Dr. Grady and Cy. Grady, do you believe the Noah's Ark was found on Mount Ararat is the real Ark? What do you think?
No, the Ark wasn't found, and it never will be. I produced a video on the Ark of Noah with Revelation TV, where I pointed out that the Ark will never be found because people have, unfortunately, a linear way of looking at the Ark. They think it only had one purpose, but actually the Ark had two. And the natural rock formation that was found at Ararat, there's two more just like it over the hill. They're somewhat smaller, but there's two more just like it. This is simply where the earth folded upwards and broke open. And you'll see a very long, pointed, oval-like shape, but that's a natural rock formation.
Mm-hmm.
The reason is that the Ark was built to survive the flood. It was not built for navigation. It had no bow, no stern. It was basically a barge. The Hebrew word is coffin, which is 6 straight boards. However, it had two purposes: to survive the flood and also to give them materials to survive for anywhere from 15 to 30 years after the flood. Remember that after the flood, there's not a live tree on earth. There are seeds in the wet mud that will germinate. This is why, for instance, they stayed in the Ark an extra 70 days, was to allow the germination of food for the animals and the germination of trees. But it's going to be 15 to 30 years before there's a useful tree. And so the Ark was built both to survive the flood and to provide materials for use after the flood.
Very interesting question has just come in, and it's asking here, dear Dr. Grady, what are your thoughts on Mark Zuckerberg's new Meta launch? I wonder if the long-term plan is to keep the humanity locked down and having us to live in a virtual reality, a bit like giving entertainment to prisoners. I have no trust in this whatsoever. Did you hear about the new launch of Meta, Grady?
Oh, yes, yes.
What do you think?
I find it very interesting because I think in one way, I appreciate the honesty, because they've been collecting metadata on everybody, but now they're going to change from Facebook to Meta just to point out that that's what they do.
You don't think it's because of the whistleblower who's released all that information about Facebook and how they use the information is dangerous towards the children, have had such bad publicity, and that they felt they had to do a rebranding, remove the name Facebook and put the name Meta?
Oh, I agree with you, Cyrus, completely on that. What I said was I thought it was a very interesting piece of honesty, because when they go from Facebook to Meta, they're simply saying, yes, we collect metadata, so we might as well be honest about it and call ourselves Meta. You know, I mean, really, I thought they would name it anything but that.
Yeah,
but I appreciate their honesty. Now, the fact of the matter is, I still think that they are definitely politically steering people in the wrong direction. They are promoting liberalism. They are against the church. They're against conservative politics. They are anti-God, anti-Bible, anti-Christian. And all you have to do is look and see what they're doing. But the name change, I thought, was a very interesting piece of novel honesty.
Jeff's actually written an interesting email as well, saying, just to say that I found an article on the Answers in Genesis website about how social media websites will block climate change deniers. It's talking about information, misinformation as well, Grady. How do you trust? What sources do you use to trust your information?
Well, of course, I read a lot of the original resource papers and that sort of thing. You may not want to take the time to do that. There are, of course, conservative news outlets. Now, for the most part, they're much smaller because they're just getting going, but I have a funny feeling they're going to be a good investment. Many people are leaving Facebook and other liberal things. TikTok, of course, is owned by the Chinese. I don't think anybody should be involved in that one at all, you know. But there are conservative sources of news that are coming out. And so I think you just need to do your own research and decide which one you're going to use.
Tell me about the access of information that you have to do your own personal research, Grady, because obviously the internet has been it's been a big thing over the last decade, 2 decades ago. And before that, I assume you were stuck in a library getting all your information. But now you're probably doing a lot of research online as well, are you?
Well, of course, where we live, I moved because we're 2 miles from one of the 5 largest universities in the United States, and I wanted access to their library. So you hit that spot on. In addition to that, of course, the internet has allowed rapid ability to access a lot of material. Now, when I mentioned the university library, I would point out to you that when I was in high school in Washington, D.C., I used to go to the Library of Congress to do my homework. Now, the internet, half of it is misinformation, disinformation, misdirection. But if we are going to do the research on the internet, we want to make sure we're going back to original sources, genuine things, not something that's contrived, not something that's misinformation. And so you have to do your research even on your sources.
Yeah.
You might find it strange, but I actually read more evolutionary material than I read creationist material when it comes to science.
Mm-hmm.
Because they are spending billions and billions of dollars on research.
Mm-hmm.
They find lots of useful information. The problem is that they publish the misinterpretation of it to directly deceive people and misdirect people into believing in evolution or their liberal views in politics, whatever. I can take the exact same research that they publish, look at it, and realize that what their spin is wrong, and that we can actually use much of what they find to promote Christianity, to promote creation science, to promote good science.
Dylan's actually talking about your books here, Grady. He says, Grady, I could take some of those Scottish books off your hands if your wife is listening, because my family came here to Ireland in the 1600s, and I'd like to learn more about it. So there you go, Grady. If your wife's ever getting angry, send your books over to Dylan.
Well, I have about 4 dozen books behind me over here on Scottish history and the clans and so forth. Now, just if he would like to know, I'm an Ulster Scot myself.
Okay.
So my people come from the Isle of Bute.
Very good. I'll call you Dr. O'Grady, don't forget.
If you wish.
This one's come in from Michael. Michael saying, do you believe there is something more sinister behind the climate change agenda? I don't like to get into conspiracy theories, but it seems like this is another ploy to increase taxes, etc. What are your thoughts?
Again, I do not get into conspiracy theories. I refuse to get involved with conspiracy theories. But there's absolutely no doubt whatsoever that the environmental terrorist groups are simply promoting socialism, communism. They are trying to tax us to the point where we can't move, we can't use resources, versus God's admonition starting in Genesis chapter 1, that we are to be wise users of the resources that he has given us individually, that the state is not supposed to determine how resources are used. Now, when the state determines how resources are used, that's communism, that's socialism. It can be fascism. But we as Christians are supposed to wisely use, and we are responsible individually to God, not to the state.
Karen's asking, hi, Dr. Grady, have any new stars been born recently?
No stars have ever been born, period. No star has ever had a mother. We have never seen a star born, in spite of all the National Geographic hyperbole, all of the David Attenboroughs, etc., etc. We have never seen a star born. No star has ever been born. God created all the stars that have ever been on day 4. He named them all with their own individual name. What we actually see in science is star deaths. Now, stars die when they go nova, supernova. In the catalog, they're SN supernova dash whatever the number may be, but there's a whole catalog of SN-1A supernovas. But we've seen stars die. We have witnessed stars die. We have never seen a star born. Now, that proves that the Earth and the universe are only about 6,000 years old, because when we take a look at our galaxy, which is a particularly large galaxy, well above average in size, we can only find hundreds of dead stars. But if the galaxy were as old as evolutionists claim, we should be finding 400,000 or 500,000 dead stars. They're not there. So what's missing is proof that it's all young.
Well, Grady, Dylan's replied in, and he says, Grady, I'm also an Ulster Scot. There you go.
You go. Mi amigo.
Los dos amigos. Very good, Grady. This one's here's from Maggie to say, I'm also, hello folks, thank you for an interesting program. I'm all for having good, healthy environment, clean air, clean water, healthy, accessible forests, but that is not the same as worrying about global warming. Environmental terrorists conflate the two things in order to confuse us. What do you think? I think you've mentioned that before, really, haven't you, Grady?
Well, I want to point out, healthier is wealthier.
Yeah.
Capitalism produces healthier, wealthier societies. But when we tax everybody the way these people are wanting to do, we actually make ourselves poor. And when we make ourselves poor, we will become less healthy, and it's going to be a whole lot dirtier in the long run.
He's written in to say, hi, Sign Dr. Grady, I have two queries. Satan was kicked out of heaven down to earth, and the chaos he's caused God must have known what would happen. Yet he allowed it. Doesn't seem very loving. Also, God likes a wager, a bet. He took Satan up and about Job, and Job suffered terribly. It doesn't make sense to me. Can you please explain? That's from Eve.
First of all, you have misinterpreted the book of Job, and you've misinterpreted what happened. The fact of the matter is that we have both the DVD that, or I should say video now because it's now on a USB, but we have a video we developed with Revelation. We have a book also available in our bookstore on Job to tell you and explain to you what the book of Job is really all about. It's a book of science. It has nothing to do with suffering whatsoever. And God did not take a bet with Satan. God taught us the modern scientific method 4,000 years ago in the first chapters of Job. And as far as Satan is concerned, in Ezekiel, God says that he created Satan perfect. That at one point, he was perfect. But that iniquity was found in him later, that he had a choice. Iniquity was found in him. And I try to liken it this way. Angels have partial free will. Humans have total free will. And there's 1/3 of the angels that decided to rebel with Satan. So he had the ability to partial free will. But once the decision was made, there's no possibility of resolution. There's no possibility of reconciliation with God. He has condemned himself and the 1/3 of those angels forever and ever, eternity.
Grady, before we finish, we've got about a minute. We've got about a minute left. I just want to get this quickly in, if you can. Les has written, say, Grady, sure you agree that God says what he means and means what he says in Genesis and the rest of the scriptures. So why is it that some Christians want to believe something that the Bible does not say? That is that God used evolution as a method of creation. In about 30 seconds, if you can, please, Grady.
That position is called theistic evolution. It is untenable for a Christian to believe it, because when you believe in theistic evolution, you are compromising with the world, you're compromising with evolutionary theory, and whether you realize it or not, you are then disavowing the cross. Because if death has always been, then human sin didn't cause it, and Christ's death cannot atone for it.
Very quickly as well, another 30 seconds before we finish. Isn't communism the Tower of Babel all over again? In 30 seconds, if you can.
I wouldn't say it was the Tower of Babel all over again, but it is. It is ultimate rebellion nonetheless. It's when man makes the law instead of obeying God's law.
Excellent. Dr. Grady, thank you so much indeed for joining us, and thank you for answering all the questions as always. God bless you.
Well, Cyrus, thank you.
Grady over and out. Thank you so much as well to all our viewers for joining us. Thank you for all of your emails. We've tried our hardest to get through as many as we could. There's been so many questions and so many answers that Dr. Grady has covered this evening. And I just want to encourage you to watch it on our website. Watch this program again. Simply go on to revelationtv.com/videos and go and choose the Q&A show. You can watch the program. You can also share it with your friends. Till next time, take care. God bless and stay with the Lord. Amen. God bless. Bye-bye.